This video is brought to you by ExpressVPN. More about them at the end of the video. Following the events of Avengers Endgame, an unexpected tragedy forces Eternals, ancient aliens that have been living on Earth in secret for thousands of years, out of the shadows to reunite against mankind's most ancient enemy, the Deviants. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Burns Views, and today we are talking about the new MCU Phase 4 film, Eternals. Now, I'll admit, when I first saw the trailer for this, I was not intrigued at all. This looked kind of generic. I was worried that there's going to be superhero fatigue. It seemed kind of like the same old thing. It almost had like a copy paste from the Justice League a little bit, and there was nothing captivating about it. It just felt kind of like meh. And maybe it's because we've gotten so many shows on Disney Plus, or maybe because Endgame was such a big monolith of a movie just to kind of hit the reset button. It just, I don't know, was not really feeling it. But I went to a fan screening tonight, and I got to see it a little bit earlier. I got to see it on Wednesday. And it's better than advertised. I'll say that much. Better than advertised. Because the trailers look kind of hollow. You know, you look at this giant 8-ball rack coming through the sky, and you're like, what is this? So let's go straight into positives. Chloe Zhao has crafted a beautiful looking film. The visuals are top notch. Kind of like Dune in a lot of ways. It's a lot of style. It looks great. The action set pieces are mostly pretty good. Not so much in the third act, but I'll talk about that in a minute. The characters are likable. You got Salma Hayek. You've got Angelina Jolie. You've got a lot of new... Bill Skarsgård, who I feel like is terribly underused. He's like Ronin. He's just a generic bad guy. And I looked at the cast, and I'm like, wow, that's what they did with Bill Skarsgård? That's what they reduced him to? Ugh. Like Barry Keoghan, I thought he sucked. I'm sorry. As a performance, as a character, across the board, I'm like, ugh. This walking cliche. All right, fine. But you know what? He's only one of the Eternals, so that's fine. We've got more characters to talk about. We got the Game of Thrones boys, which, again, not to go into spoilers, but Kit Harington... It's like a glorified cameo, and I don't want to say more than that. Maybe I'll do a spoiler video that kind of talks about that more, but it seems borderline unfair to put him on any of the posters or advertisements in the sense of, yeah, he's there, but not really. The other characters are pretty good. Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, you know, they pull their weight, and I think given what they're given to work with, they're doing a pretty solid job. So visually, acting, direction, cinematography, I think it's all well executed. But that's not really the problem with this movie. The problem with this movie, and it's not a bad movie by any measure, by any stretch. I know people are saying, oh, it's the lowest rated MCU movie in the history of the 23 plus MCU movies we got. The problem arrives in the third act, because the pacing is a little bit off and the visuals are underwhelming. And by the third act, you're checking your watch going, this is kind of boring. I've seen this movie. I've seen these tropes. I've seen this cliche. And it's almost like Watchmen meets Umbrella Academy, if I had to describe the tone. I think it does feel more like a DCEU movie. Doesn't help that they make a reference to Superman about 4 times in this movie, but I digress. And I think people who like the DCEU movies, I think will enjoy this. Like the Snyder Cut, this kind of had kind of a vibe of the Snyder Cut to me. And sometimes that works, and sometimes I feel like, what are we doing? Why are we watching this? And why are some of these characters so paper thin when you could do so much more with them? I'd rather they just focused on lesser characters and really develop them as opposed to kind of opening it up to 10 different characters, maybe 6. There's 10 well, I lost track, but it felt a little stretched thin and it felt a little paper thin. I think there's probably going to be a better sequel in this. I think it's a good foundation of a movie, but it does a lot of that. There's a lot of teasing of future installments. There's a lot of exposition dumps, and there are a few emotional beats. There was a couple moments that I'm like, oh, and I was, you know, kind of getting that swelling in the back of my throat when you get a little choked up. But they were fleeting and then quickly onto something else that was far less interesting. I don't know. I need to see it again, but as of right now, I found it to be a bit underwhelming. I just don't think it's as horrible as everybody makes it out to be. Yes, it is different. Yes, it is unique. Yes, it is not like every other movie. There's no quipping, which I liked. I like that it's not, hey, look, we're doing one-liners left and right. Because sometimes you're watching one of these Avengers movies, and they're cracking jokes when Thanos is like about to destroy everything. You're like, come on, man. Don't get me wrong. Paul Rudd is funny. Tony is funny. I get it. But sometimes I'm like, you're kind of deflating it. So this movie doesn't have that. There's very few jokes in this movie, which I appreciated. But at the same time, it felt like a lot of exposition, lots of flashbacks. You know, we'll be in the present day, and without much notice, we'll just like go all the way back to like Babylon, 505 AD, and you're like, what? And then we get like a little bit of a character arc thing to explain a character's motivations, and you're like, alright, I guess. So by the time you get to the end of the movie, it's 2.5 hours long. You're kind of like, alright. The first half was great. The second half was a bit underwhelming and predictable. Bit of a slog, if you will. I'm definitely going to check it out again once it comes to Disney+. And, you know, in the third act too, the visuals could have been better. The visuals are like, you could tell they're all on a green screen or a blue screen. And, you know, they're on a beach or there's a volcano in the distance, but mostly there's a beach and you can see like on the water, there's giant clouds, but there's nothing out there. It's very, like, you could have done anything with these green screens. You could have filled the environment with anything, and it's just kind of like a desaturated beach. And I'm like, really? Why is this? You're Marvel. Marvel it up. You know, do something. And, you know, the acting kind of matches that mundane, boring, stifled kind of feel to it. And I enjoyed it. It felt like I was reading a comic, in that it felt kind of exposition-y, lots of dialogue, but at the same time, I'm like, this is not cinematic. This is not, wow, I'm watching a movie. This is almost like an adapted comic book, kind of like Watchmen, if you will. Watchmen is probably the best way to describe this movie. It's very slow. You got to carve out 2.5 hours for it. You got to pay attention to it closely, because they're gonna drop a lot of exposition on you. They're gonna tell you a lot and show you only so much. And I guess the biggest issue with this film is making these characters likable enough that you're willing to go on the journey with them. And sometimes those characters do that, and sometimes the other characters don't. Sometimes the other characters remind me of the characters from New Mutants, and I'm like, oh, okay. So guys, at the end of the day, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but then again, so did the movie. So I'm still trying to quantify it in my brain, because there's so much that they kind of threw at me in almost 3 hours. Yes, there's a post-credit scene and a pre-credit scene, so be sure to stick around. Not the best in the Phase 4 MCU. It's somewhere in the middle of that Phase 4, and it's not bad, but it's not great. It's just, it's fine, and that's why I'm going to give it a 6.6 out of 10. There's some good stuff in there. There's some good lore, some good mythology, good world building. But I think the pacing could have been better. I think they could have brought a little bit more heart and emotionality to some of the main characters. They kind of felt a little wooden. But all in all, I don't regret seeing this movie. I would recommend it. It's just not the greatest MCU movie I've ever seen. Not even within MCU Phase 4. But that's just my take. What did you guys think of MCU's, Marvel's, The Eternals? Be sure to comment down below. I'd love to get your take. Also, before I go, this video is sponsored by ExpressVPN, who are allowing me to give away 3 months absolutely free when you sign up for a 1-year pack. You can travel to any location you want, allowing you to watch any of the TV shows and movies that are not available in the country that you're in. Want to watch one of the Batman movies and catch up before the new one comes out? Bam! ExpressVPN has you covered. It's also the best way to protect your personal information and data from sites that may try to obtain it. I'm looking at you, Mark Zuckerberg. So go check out ExpressVPN by clicking the link in the description down below and protect your personal information today. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. I have been John here on Burns Reviews. You just got burned. Be sure to subscribe, ring that bell, give the video a thumbs up, and we will see you next time.